All right, guys, good afternoon and welcome to the International Association of Woodcarvers. Today is Saturday, April the 2nd, 2022, a little bit after 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. I'm coming to you live from the Charlotte Woodcarving Show in Charlotte, North Carolina. So you'll notice that I have a little different background tonight or today, but that's okay. Down here enjoying some carving and some fellowship. Some of the people that we've had on the show before are down here, and we're having a good time. So if anybody is in the area, make sure you come out tomorrow to the Woodcarving Show in Charlotte. Give a little pitch, a little shout out for them. I think there's about 150 carvers here and tons of wood carvings and carving competition and stuff. So try to come by if you get a chance. Today on our show, we have a special guest coming to us from Germany. We have Steve Tomashek coming on. He's going to be talking a little bit about carving miniatures. He also has a couple of books that he's published. One's called Tiny Whittling. The other one is Scrap Wood Whittling. And he's going to be coming on talking about that and doing a little demonstration for us. Before we get started with that, I want to tell you a little bit about what we've got coming up after this week. Next week, we'll have Joe Yu on. He's a CCA member. Joe's going to be talking about doing armatures and creating clay models so that you can do your own pattern. So tune in next Saturday for Joe. Chris Hammock's going to come on April the 16th. Chris is also a CCA member. He's going to be talking to us about the carving show that's coming up that the CCA is doing in September called Carving the Rockies. That's the first annual show, and he's going to come on and talk to us a little bit about the offerings out there. On April the 23rd, Brett Andrews is coming on. On April the 30th, we're going to have Cecilia Schuler, who's the crank lady. She's going to be coming on and doing a little demonstration for us. On May the 5th, we'll have Ken Kuhar. He's going to be coming on and talking to us about his carving journey. Dana from the Carving Junkies is going to come on May the 14th. She also did a article in our most recent newsletter that was sent out yesterday. If you haven't signed up for that, make sure you go out on our link tree and sign up for our newsletter. We plan on doing that once a month. And she's done an article for us there, and hopefully she'll be doing more articles for us in the future. And then on May the 21st, we're going to have Dylan Goodson that's going to be coming on. He's a relief carver. He also does carving in the round, and he's going to be talking to us about his carving journey. He also has some classes coming up that he's going to be talking about. After that meeting in May, we're going to drop back to doing meetings once a month for the summer. So we'll probably do a meeting in June, one in July, and one in August, and then pick back up in September with our weekly meetings. So that's kind of what we have in plan as far as this group goes. But we have plenty of content scheduled for you through May the 21st, so make sure you join us each week.
Are you going to try to do it on a certain Saturday?
What's that? I'm sorry?
Are you going to try to do it on a certain Saturday of the month, like the 1st, the 2nd, the 3rd, all the way through the summer?
We've scheduled the Saturdays. We can post that on our social media. I don't know what they are right off because I'm not at home at my office, but yeah, we'll make those available to everybody.
Thank you. Sorry to interrupt.
No, that's fine. So having said all that, we're going to go ahead and turn it over to Steve Tomashek again. Steve has 2 books that he's published. He carves miniatures, and he's going to be talking a little bit about his carving journey. And again, he's coming to us from Germany. So that, again, proves that we're truly an international group. So, Steve, thanks for coming on today, and I'll go ahead and turn it over to you.
Well, thank you. I guess to start, it'd be good to know a little bit about me. I grew up in Minnesota. I started carving early teens, probably. My dad was a artist, a hobby artist. And he dabbled in a lot of different mediums. He was acrylic and watercolor, and he built furniture and carved decoys. And I was exposed to all that. We had a big workshop when I was a kid, and I carved mostly gifts for grandma or, stuff like this. And it wasn't until college that the last couple of years of college, in fact, that I decided to take carving or whittling as a hobby and started doing it full time. And I guess one of the first pieces that I did was a chess set. I was playing a lot of chess at the time, and it seemed like a good combination of hobbies because I was learning chess at the time, and I was also learning whittling And in between moves, I would be working on a chess piece. Once I got out of school, I was going to be a teacher, and I ended up teaching as a substitute for a couple of years. And on the side, I was carving, and I found a couple little galleries that I could sell my work through. And after a couple of years, I decided to do it full time. And I started doing shows, and over the next couple of years, developed the craft a little bit better, a little bit more, and met someone who became a really good friend of mine, Glenn Gordon. And we started taking pictures of my work together. And basically taking these pictures just to get into shows, because you need good photographs. And instead of just taking them next to a penny or something to show scale, we decided to put them with an object that kind of commented on the object or told a little story. And not only did we use it to get it, or did I use the photos to get into shows like art fairs, but then I had them blown up and put them in the back of my booth, because my work is miniature. I wanted people to see them from the road, and that was one way to do it. And they came in and would see my miniatures, but from the road they could see these large photos. And at the first show that I had these photos, someone said, "Well, can I buy the photo?" And I said, "Well, at the next show, I'll make some and I'll come back." And that developed into a very lucrative business, as well as selling the carvings, and a lot easier too, because I just had to hit a print button instead of carving and painting everything. So that's basically how my professional career in carving developed. I've sold online through eBay, through a website, through a lot of art fairs in the Midwest, through galleries. I picked up galleries in New York and Boston and Chicago and Minneapolis, and most of them have kind of fallen away for various reasons. Now I have galleries in Germany that I sell through. And for me, having a family now, it's just a lot easier to sell through a gallery. I do a lot fewer shows. In fact, this year I'm just going to be doing one show, and then a few commissions here and there. So that's kind of the journey that I've been on. At this point, I'm kind of part-time. I carve, but then I also am a house husband, as they call it here in Germany. I do cooking and taking care of my daughter after school. And we also have farm animals. We live on a farm out in the country, and I take care of chickens and ducks and sheep and horses. So I have a pretty full and varied life, and I like it because carving 8 hours or 12 hours a day can really ruin your hands after a while. And now that I'm a little bit older, I can slow down on the carving a bit and have my hands and arms do something else besides carving during the day. Once I moved to Germany in 2011. I met my wife here in 2009. I moved to Germany in 2011. And right after that, I was contacted by a publisher in England, and they wanted me to write a book. They'd never done a carving book, so they were a little bit green on that. But I ended up doing this in England. It was called whittling. Let's see, and then they sold it to Germany, and it became "Fang an zu schnitzen," which means "start to carve." It was like a command. And that did really well. Evidently, it was a bestseller in Germany. I didn't see any money from it, but it's good because it made me kind of an expert. When I went to markets or shows here, people would say, "Oh, I saw your book," or "I have your book," and you must be good. So then last year, during COVID, during this whole COVID time, it was all a blur, but Fox Chapel came to me after I'd done a few articles for their magazine and wanted me to write a similar book actually, on called this one, scrap wood whittling. And most of you probably know Fox Chapel, and they're very established in wood carving. And they gave me more time to work on this book, which really helped. I could really develop it a lot more than the first book, and I'm happy with it. So that's that's always good. I have I tried to divide it into like beginner projects and intermediate projects, and then more advanced projects. And then the beginner projects, they still look pretty polished, but the designs are supposed to be such that, you know, there's not a lot of undercutting or difficult work to be done on them. The middle ones are pretty easy also, but there's usually just one element, the ears or something, that is quite difficult. It requires some practice. And then the more advanced ones, well, part of it I get into themes of my work, miniaturization, painting, which is a big deal for me. I see myself not only as a sculptor, but a painter. And that's what I like about what I've been doing, is that I can practice both in a very small form, a very simple form. I can be both a sculptor and a painter. There's not much money put out. Also, they're mostly animals. That's another theme that I work on. So I do these little workshops, or projects are like workshops, or they're based around a theme. And then the last projects are something that I've been working on for the past, maybe 10 years, which is carving inside of a box, or creating a scene, which kind of, it brings the photography that I did with Glenn into a three-dimensional space again, or the carving is in a three-dimensional space. So it's kind of a mirror of that. And that's fun. I like having to think within a space. The confinement, the limitations of it are challenging. And part of the reason I get into whittling too is because it's just one knife. That's how I define whittling, is just using one knife or very limited tools to work. So those are my books. That's kind of my original bio. And this is my travel workshop. I don't know, let's see, is it? Okay, there we go. This is kind of what I travel with, what I go to shows with, if I want to work at a show. I don't use, and I've never used leather or Kevlar hands, Kevlar gloves. I've only used, first of all, I used the leather finger, but I found that they wear out pretty quick and they're kind of expensive. So I started using these rubber ones, and they're a lot cheaper, and they don't stop a knife, obviously, but it's like an extra layer of skin. And I'm just carving towards, I'm gonna give a little piece of wood here, a little box of scraps around. I do a lot of pairing cuts and really simple cuts, and I use the rubber finger as a stop, but it doesn't actually go into the finger. The knife doesn't go into the finger; it just kind of bounces off because it's rubber. I usually use a big hog out knife like this. This is a Dell Stubbs Pinewood Forge knife, and then I usually have a detail knife. I sometimes don't even use this, and then sometimes I also use a small gouge, or this is a V-gouge. So not very many tools. If I'm working on something that's really small, a lot of times I'll use little needle files like this. And also recently I picked up a tool, this little grinder. I like it because it can fit in my portable case. It's Kulia. I think they're advertising quite a bit now. It's made in the USA. They sent it to me, and it's perfectly strong enough for what I'm doing. It's basically like for what I'm doing. It's like the files, and and I haven't had any problems with it, like overheating or not being able to handle the wood that I'm doing. I don't put a lot of pressure on it, but it works great. And I like that little tool. Kind of like most of you guys, probably, I like to collect tools. I have more tools than I need. The other thing that I do have in my toolbox, I forgot to put it in, is a little pin vise and tiny drills down to the smallest that I can find. They're number 80. And I use those for drilling holes to hold the piece while I paint. And also sometimes I make little mice, and I'll put in the whiskers, and I'll drill a hole for the whiskers. So basically,
Steve, there's a question in the chat. There's a question in the chat, Steve. There's a question about the name of the grinder the little small grinder you had.
Yeah, it's Kuliu. It's here. I'll put it up to the thing. It's Culiau. Maybe this one would be better. It's got its name right on there. It's not a great name, but it's here. I'll turn it on. It's not very loud either, and it has just 3 speeds. But it has an overload fuse that if you press too hard and get the motor overheated, it'll actually save it from breaking down. And it's supposed to work for 2 hours. I've never used it that long. I'm usually using it for maybe 5-10 minutes, and so I've never had to take it to the limit of its usefulness, and that's good. I don't use it much. It's just my detail, a detail tool. Usually I don't bring if I'm traveling, I don't bring a stone along. I do have diamond stones that I use, just wet stones like this. And that's basically if I chip a blade or break the tool somehow that it needs to be refashioned, but otherwise it's just a leather strap with, I use aluminum oxide, which is also, I think it's called white gold in some quarters. I've gotten other strapping compounds, but I use this one almost exclusively. This is what I've used from the beginning, and I've tried the other ones and I just don't like them, or I guess I'm used to this one. I also have a strap that's made out of ceramic and one that's made out of just a piece of basswood, and they both work too. So that's my tools for the most part. I do have other tools, but I'm not going to go into those unless people want to know other knives that I use or have collected. Collection is not really important. Oh, the other thing that I do have that is kind of important is an optivisor with ×3, I think it is, or something, ×3.5. And if you're working a lot, it takes the strain off your eyes. I can work without. I have really good close vision. These are for far vision. But if I'm going to be doing it for a long time, I need to take some strain off my eyes if I want to not go blind over time. Painting, I use just an old CD as a palette, and I like it because it's a smooth surface. It doesn't. If I'd use other things like cardboard or whatever, sometimes the little grains come up and get picked up into the paint. Of course, I'm painting really small stuff, but don't need a lot of paint. So I decided early on that as long as I'm not using a lot of paint, I might as well get the best paint I can, or the best paint that I find. And originally I was using Liquitex. It looks like this, in a little tube. But I found that this is even better. This is Lascaux. This is a Swiss brand. And the pigments are ground really fine, and they're all color fast, meaning you don't have any trouble with fading. And so, a tube like this, it's going to last me like 3-4 years. It's probably going to go dry before I actually finish it up because I'm painting such tiny stuff. How tiny? This, you know, my smallest work is probably about 3-4 millimeters, so about this, you know, that big. And my average piece, this is a little pig that I do, and it's not fully carved; it's only partially carved. I carve the body with the head and the ears. And this is actually in the book. There's a whole series of these animals that are leaping, and I put in toothpicks for the legs, and it saves a little bit of time. But also, I like the cartoon nature of it, and not only am I a miniaturist, but I like cartoons. You know, like any of the major cartoons that have come out during my lifetime or even before. And I like a cartoon style to my work. So for the really tiny work, I use I'll usually carve it on the end of a stick. So this is just a piece of basswood, but usually I use something harder. Piece of this is boxwood. This is a piece of Greek boxwood, and I've actually drawn on this already to make a tiny train. It makes it a lot easier if you're doing something this small, if you have it on a piece of wood that you can just carve on the end of it like this, instead of just holding it in your hand when it's so teeny tiny. It also protects your fingers a bit. Let's see, what else? Brushes. I just found out recently that the main brushes that I used to use are no longer available. The company stopped using them. Or stopped making them. La Cornell. So you can't find these anymore. But there's other companies that do make small brushes. This is another Cornell. Here's a tiny one. Let's see if we can get that in focus. Probably not. But there's sizes on brushes. They go down 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The bigger the number, the bigger they are. And these are 20-0 brushes. And I usually use, I don't use a lot of spotter brushes. This is a spotter brush, and I don't really find it useful just because it is so tiny it hardly holds any paint. So I usually use a liner brush. That'll hold more paint. I can still make spots with it. I also can make lines, of course. It holds a little bit more paint. And since I'm using acrylic dries pretty quick, about 2-3 minutes once you apply it. You can obviously add water to it and make it a different consistency. Whether you want to make a wash or make it really opaque. So I think the biggest brush that I use on a normal basis is something like this. This is a number 4. That I use for mixing the paint, but also for large areas. I'll show you some of the stuff that I have right now that hasn't sold, so no one found it particularly of their liking. Here's a camel, and I painted spots on it. That's kind of the thing that I've done for a long time, just different spot patterns and playing with different types of spotting. Here's a tiny dolphin. And that's pretty basic painting pattern. Looks kind of like a dolphin. Here's one of my more advanced carvings. This is more like doing 3 carvings in one. This is all one piece. And I'm pretty sure, yeah, it's a piece of boxwood. But the horns are basically separate carvings. You know, it's like doing 3 carvings. But it's all one piece, and I didn't break any of it. So pretty happy with that. So that's kind of the range of my figure work. Then I also do boxes, and the smallest boxes that I do are matchboxes. And I think if any of you have the magazine Woodcarver Illustrated, or one of the Woodcarver magazines. You've probably seen some of or one of the matchboxes that I did, because these are unfinished. I'm still planning out this one. I want to make it actually into a 4 space box. Here's one that's a little bit more done. It's I'm still planning it, but it's another 4 space box. I'll show you one of them that is in the book. That's hanging out. There's, and this is doesn't show up very well. I bought these frames. They're thick, deep frames. I bought them mainly. They're really cheap. I bought them mainly because they're cheap, and I can bring them to shows. And if it falls, I'm not out $30. I'm out like $4 for that. I don't know if they'd make them anymore, but so then I actually make this box and make the carving inside that, and then paint it. My boxes are also some of the most time-consuming or advanced pieces, the most detailed pieces that I've done. And the one that I have right now, that's probably the most detailed and took the longest. This took about a month. Just this piece of brain coral right here, I remember recording it in my head, that it took about 4 hours just to paint it. Obviously the carving on that is not going to be very long, but I think there's about 50 fish in here, and then a lot of coral. And this was inspired by trips that I made to Puerto Rico when my sister lived there. And it was the first time in my life that I could go snorkeling, because I was born, but when I was young, I had an ear infection that kept me from going underwater for most of my life. And then I found different things that I could use finally, and was able to go underwater. And the coral reef was like a little world, you know. I deal in little things and tiny objects and tiny creatures. And it was like a foreign world, like an alien world, but it really did something to me that here was this brand new world that I had never seen before, and I saw it up close, and that really had a strong influence on me. So I spent a month afterwards putting that together. See, is there anything else?
Steve, while you're taking a break, there's a couple questions in the chat we've had.
Sure.
First off, where in Minnesota were you living originally?
I grew up in Winona.
Winona, okay.
Winona is down on the Mississippi River by La Crosse.
Okay, Johnny O from Minnesota was asking that. So,
yeah,
what inspires you to carve small?
I think I've always been fascinated with miniatures. Kind of a strange thing that I didn't start out really fascinated with animals per se. I was, well, my dad and older brothers were into little miniature tanks and playing games with these miniature tanks. And as a very young child, I would see them playing with these tanks. And when I got a little bit older, I started playing with the tanks too, and started making them. And I was carving little airplanes and little ships and little tanks. And it wasn't until college that I got back into it that I started doing more animal life. And I still do a few airplanes or bicycles and stuff like this. I don't do tanks and military miniatures much. I might do the one thing that I would like to do is a C-47, I believe, because I'd like to photograph it dropping raisins over Berlin, because one of my proudest, I was a history major, and one of the proudest things I think that the Americans ever did was supply Berlin with coal in the Berlin airlift. And one of the things that they also did was drop candy to the kids who would wait along the airport. And all those kids that got that candy, you know, that made a huge impression on them. And I think that was one of the best things that we ever did as a country, is to to make that airlift happen. And so I do want to, and I found a little model book in Berlin when I lived there, of a C-47 with blueprints and everything. And I do want to do that. Anyway, that's where that comes from. That's where the miniatures come from.
And a couple of question about where you purchase your matchboxes.
Well, the actual box I did purchase. I could probably make it. It's just a piece of cardboard, and this is wood. I actually make these out of wood, and I cut them out with a tiny table saw. It's very accurate. So it's like 13 millimeters exactly, and so they fit very snug. Yeah, but just I bought on Amazon, you can buy these matchboxes with the whole thing, and they're just ornamental. I haven't written anything or drawn anything on here. I eventually plan to do that, but I just haven't gotten around to it. This idea, actually, I should say, comes from a tradition in Germany. I was just reading more about this lately. I live near an area called the Erzgebirge that was a toy making area in Germany, and it's about 2 hours from here. I plan to go visit the major museum. They made toys from the late 1800s up until recently they still do, and they make little what are called wheel animals. You might have seen or heard about these. They actually use a lathe to cut out the profile of these in a big circle. So make a whole bunch of horses. This is a horse. Make a whole bunch of these at one time, and they'll cut them out a pie-shaped profile of a horse, and they'll cut them out with a bandsaw and just do a little bit of carving on them. This one was made in the DDR in the East Germany. And you can tell because the paint is pretty dull and it's not very well made. But they still make those today. The other thing that they do is make these, they've made these little, it's a German word. We call them matchboxes. They call them, it's a long word. Germans really like to string together words. I can't remember the exact thing. Streichholzschachteln is the name of it. The Schachteln is a little box. Streichholz is a match. So it is a matchbox. And the reason they started making these little things is because at some point during the time that they were making toys, and I think they actually started by making spoons and implements, utensils, but at some point the customs, the taxes for the area changed from being based on value to being based on size. So suddenly it was a lot more advantageous if you didn't want to pay as many taxes to start making small objects. And so I'm kind of right at home here that they're making these tiny objects right in my backyard. And I have a couple books on it, and I have been to a couple Spielzeug, which is a toy museums. Spielzeug, I mean, Spiel is play, and Zeug is thing, so plaything museum. And I've done a little research, and it's really kind of influenced my work. These little pigs that I showed you that are kind of put together, that are assembled, are kind of in that vein that, they used the lathe quite a bit in their work because it allowed for mass production, and then they assembled things. It wasn't necessarily a pure carving thing. In fact, in a lot of them, the carving is only to finish up, to finish the piece. So yeah, it's nice to be in an area that has a rich history of miniatures for one thing, but also just that they've been producing and inventing things that they sell worldwide, made wood products and miniatures. Yeah. So.
Which one of your carvings are you most personally proud of?
Which what? Which
one of your carvings are you most personally proud of?
Probably as the box is probably the one that I at this point can think of that I'm most proud And the moose also is pretty important to me. I took that on a canoe trip up into the Boundary Waters canoe area and took a picture of it on a stone and sold the picture. And I've sold more pictures of that than the carving is probably worth. But yeah, that was technically probably the most difficult. And I don't really try to do a whole lot of technically difficult work. I like kind of the simplicity of some pieces. But obviously when you do something technically difficult, you feel proud of it. Yeah. But if you can pull off something that's really simple and looks good, there's something to be proud of there too. It's deceptively simple. Any more questions?
We actually just had a person put in the chat, said the Berlin airlift that Gail Haverson, and I'm sorry, I probably mispronounced that, known for the candy bomber, just passed away in February at age 101.
Wow.
So somebody throwing some good random facts.
Yeah, I in the last village that we lived in Brandenburg, we lived next to a guy who grew up as a kid in Berlin, in the ruins of Berlin, and it was ruined. And he said it was a great childhood because they just got to run around. Luckily, evidently, they didn't run into any unexploded ordnance. But he said playing on these old tanks, that was just great. And he remembered one thing that really stuck in my mind. He said the first time that he'd ever seen a strawberry, it was still green. And they didn't know, or he didn't know what it was, or that you were supposed to wait till it was red to eat it. So he actually ate it when it was green, which must have been horrible. But yeah, as a historian living here, the history is pretty deep. Not only World War II, but obviously Germany has existed as a country since 1870. But there's been people living here for a long, long time. As organized, countries or principalities or whatnot. I could talk a little more about Germany if you want. I don't know if anybody's interested in that.
Well, a couple of questions in the chat. One was, where can you find your work that's for sale?
Well, in Germany, I sell through a gallery in Dresden called Klein Ad. And mostly, those are mostly ornaments or small pieces. And then in Bremen, although they close over the summer because the people that run are artists and they do markets over the summer. I also, I have a Facebook page, but I haven't really put anything up for sale there. And also with Instagram, I haven't put anything for sale. Probably later in the summer, I'll try to do something maybe with Etsy. The problem is that even with my tiny work, it costs about $20 to ship it to the US, even the tiniest thing. So I try not to take orders that are less than like $100. You can commission me to do something. What I usually do for commission is find out what your price range is, what you're interested in. You have to decide on a subject, and usually some idea of what size you want. You want it really teeny tiny, or I do stuff up to about 3 to 5 inches. That's maximum. And then what I'll do is I'll do some drawings, some research. I'll give you some designs, show you, just what's nice with the computer these days is you can send email, all kinds of stuff, pictures, designs. And if you like that design, I'll start working on it. And once it's done, I'll give you a price beforehand, how much I think it'll cost. I'll give you a range. And once it's done, I'll send you a picture. If you're okay with it, then you pay and then I ship. That's usually how I do it. And it's kept me busy enough. I'm going to do one show in May here in Jena, which is spelled like Jenna with one N. And it's actually an interesting show. It's called a Holzmarkt. The Holz is wood. So it's a wood market, but it's everything wood. It's everything from chainsaws and chainsaw carving to people who do tree trimming and lots of crafts too, lots of crafts and very fine art. And it's big, it's pretty sprawling, and it's just one day. And it's interesting. All these different types of markets and shows and art fairs and whatnot. I've done a lot of different venues. I used to do a show in Hamburg, but it's a little bit too far for me right now. And I sell enough of my work just through my galleries and commissions that I'm busy, and with house and farm too. Keeps me very busy.
Carving, carving
Yep.
such small pieces, do you have much breakage in the legs or arms?
When I first started, yeah, a lot. Now, not so much. I just know, maybe 1 out of 20 or 30 pieces I'll break. I just know that I know the material. I know the knives. It really helps to use the same knives over and over and the same material. You learn what it'll take and what not to do, and how hard you can press and how thin you can make it.
Steve, you've had some experience with potato wood that's from Germany. Is that worth is that worth speaking to now?
It's interesting. It's an interesting thing. I think there are similar type woods in the U.S. that or it's not a wood. It's a material. I have a little piece here that I carved just to show you. I don't have the blocks though. Someone ordered a piece from the U.S. or a bunch and I sent them some. I used to have a whole bunch. I sent them some, but I think it is affected by the altitude or the when I went over, it got there and it was really hard. And usually it's not very hard. This is a little dog that I did, and it was nice. It's nice because you can really carve it very quickly. And basically make a model of what you're going to do. So if you're working on something that's technically difficult, it's pretty similar to wood. Instead of having a grain, it has layers. It's just layers of material. And if you mess up, you can actually lick it and kind of return it to the material, because it's made out of potato starch, and the starch will stick together. It's an interesting product. I know that a store like Dick Blick had something similar. It wasn't a potato-based thing, but it was a lighter material. I don't remember the name of it, but I don't know if they even still have it. But I think there's probably other products like that around. I think it's really good for a beginner, and like I said, it's also nice for making a model when you're not sure exactly where you want to go with something, or you can't visualize it. It's a very, very light material, but pretty solid, pretty strong. Amazing what people invent. The guy that invented it is the university professor, and he just did this on the side as a hobby. I don't know why, but yeah, he's based in Germany. But yeah, I think one of the troubles is they have to find a different way to ship it, because I don't know if I shipped it in winter, but I know that, at altitude, things are a lot colder. And for some reason, it was hard, very hard when the guy got it at the other end. Although I took some over, I smuggled some back to the U.S. just to show people at art fairs, and that it didn't affect mine. So I'm not sure what happened to his.
Yeah, I've communicated with the man that's developed this, and he sent me some samples, and he makes different densities.
Yeah.
Somehow or another, he's able to make it more dense, so it's more stable if you're going to do skinny legs or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't think it lends itself to the flying pigs and things like you're doing with the toothpick legs. Nothing that tiny, but
it could. I think I could make something. This stuff is did you get really hard stuff or medium?
I got the harder stuff, but
Okay.
honestly, I haven't attempted to carve it yet.
Okay. Yeah, it's funny. One of the selling points that he had for it was that it was also edible, because it is made out of potato, and it's food grade S-papier, edible paper that he makes it out of.
Yeah, I don't know what the FDA
It's not
would
really
say
cheap.
about that.
Not really cheap. Yeah, really. It's not very cheap though. Wood is cheaper.
It's Dan in Canada. We're just wondering, do you use cyanoacrylate at all for your repairs?
Yeah, we use called it crazy glue or super glue.
Okay.
I can't pronounce what you just said. But yeah, for repairs, I also use just basic wood, or not for repairs, but for gluing stuff together, I use wood glue. And this is the kind that you can get here. But yeah, you can get different kinds of, I'll just call it crazy glue. They call it second glue, meaning like the time second. Here's another one. Yeah, they call it second glue, or Blitz Schnell Mini Gel. I like the gel the best, but yeah, I use it for repairs, although I don't make a lot of repairs. Usually when something breaks, it's kind of catastrophic. It goes away.
Thanks.
Do you have a favorite kind of wood that you might use for the size of the piece? Yeah,
like I said, I use basswood or boxwood for the really, really tiny stuff, the stuff that I carve like on the end of a stick like that. Excuse me. But mostly I use basswood or linden. And I've gotten in the habit of having basswood from Minnesota shipped to me. But I've also learned how to dry the linden here to make it almost the same consistency, the density as the basswood that I get from Minnesota. So it doesn't take much. I mean, it's not difficult to dry wood as long as you have a little bit of space and chainsaw. I've also used pear as a harder wood. I like that. It's very creamy, right? I would call it. But that holds a lot of detail. Here on the farm, we've got a lot of fruit woods. We've got a lot of fruit trees. And so I've been playing with that a little bit, but I do like to use basswood primarily. And especially when I'm making stuff for sale that I'm producing in volume or in small batches, then I definitely use basswood or linden, just because it saves my hands. I mean, the carving boxwood over and over is really tough on your hands, especially if it's a big piece. I'll get some of the pieces that I sell in the galleries. I'll show you what I do. So I put them in a box like this to store them. But another thing that I've been using is nuts as bases for, and this is one of the projects in Woodcarving magazine. I just carved a tiny little bird there and then mounted on I think it's red oak. And I collect those like a squirrel. We also have hazelnuts around, hazelnut in the yard, hazelnut tree. And so I make a little hazelnut version as well. Which one focuses better? So these are little ornaments, and I sell a ton of them. But I make them in groups. I'll carve a bunch of them one at a time and then put them on toothpicks, and then paint them like 20 or 30 of them as one bird, one species, so that the colors are all the same. And I don't have to remix colors, because bird colors they're sometimes difficult you don't find them in a tube. You have to mix them. And if you want them to all be the same, you gotta do them all at once. Another thing that I've been doing more recently, I think I started these last year, is I have a lot of extra caps from the acorns, because a lot of the tops are bad, they're foul. So I've been using the bottoms as little nests for birds. And this is an owl. And then I can get tiny little eggs here that are turned, and I put a little egg inside the.
Hey Steve, if you put your hand behind it, it'll focus. If you put your hand behind it, it'll focus on it.
There we go. Okay, thanks.
Go. Perfect.
Yeah. So it was funny because I just recently I was running low on these eggs, and I forgot where I'd purchased them, and I started looking on the internet where I purchased these, and they're like 4 by 6 millimeters, so they're really tiny. And I finally found a place, and it was on my bookmarks, and it's the only place I can find them is in a town that's about 10 minutes from here. So, you know, so here's what these little pigs look like when they're done. And then I'll mount them on a toothpick and put them in a put them on a little block of wood. These I originally designed or was trying to design a Christmas ornament, and I was making little deer like this, and they would hang. And I was working on it at a show at a market here, and someone said, "Well, could you put it on a pedestal like this?" And, well, yeah, next time I'll do that, and I'll bring it. And these are more popular than the hanging version. So, you know, it's a pretty easy design. It's just that the ears are delicate, and you just have to get that down. But you can complete something like this if you work on it and do more and more. I think I can carve the body in 15, 20 minutes. Maybe even less than that, I'm not sure.
So what is your favorite thing or animal that you like to whittle and paint? Or both, or one to whittle, one to paint? Which are your favorites?
Well, I know that I have. Usually my favorite is the project that I'm working on currently. I know that's kind of a cop-out, but I don't really have a favorite animal. I like chickens. I don't necessarily like carving them because their feet are a real pain when you're carving at my scale. But that's a challenge. You have to use your design skills to figure out how you're going to do it without spending 5 hours carving the feet. I usually don't use like metal or anything like that. And painting wise, I really like painting a little bit larger pieces. I know this is kind of abstract, but not necessarily any individual animal, a little bit larger pieces, and not realistically more a fantasy or fantastical paint job instead of the painting it like it's natural. On the other hand, sometimes I like to paint something in the natural colors, but kind of twist the design of the painting a bit so that it looks a little fantastical, but the colors are still there. It's still the same colors that it's supposed to be. Mm-hmm. Maybe it's a little bit bumped up a bit, you know, a little bit brighter or shifted a little bit to the red or blue or something. But yeah, painting, like I said, I like being a sculptor and a painter, and I like playing with all aspects of it and the combination of it too. And being able to do it. When I first started out in college, and I just had basically a set like this, you know, paints and a knife and a few blocks of wood. I'm like, wow, this is amazing that I can practice doing this and get stuff done really quick and evaluate it and go on. And, you know, I was kind of in this intellectual zone because of college all the time. And I'd go to the library and pick out books and photocopy all of the sculptures that I could find. And it was really I didn't get any credit for it, but it was really an intense study on my own of miniatures, of animal sculpture, of art in general. And meanwhile, playing a lot of chess and carving a chess set. I was skipping classes actually just to do this. I was skipping my normal classes to work on my own obsession, I guess.
Earlier, you showed a camel that you painted. The spots on that, there's a person who commented on there was wondering kind of what your take and thought process on the spots, how you got that done.
Well, yeah, this particular one, I started with a brown background that's pretty similar to what a camel is supposed to look like. And then I probably had a lot of extra paint from that color and just took other colors and mixed it with a small portion just to play around with the spots, with colors that are adjacent, but also very colorful. You know, there's pink here, there's a green, there's a lot of beige. It's mostly green and pink and beige. This is a long time ago. This was in 2008 that I made this. This is an antique. I do like the spots. I like making different patterns, just using dots, and I've gotten pretty good at making them just with a brush. I don't go like this. I don't spot them like that. I actually make a little spot just with moving my fingers like that.
When you're starting, do you rough out the shape on the skill saw, or do you just grab a block and a knife?
I was pretty much using blocks, and I still usually just bring a bunch of blocks. Oops, this is not a piece of wood that I would use. So let's see if I can find one. So it's something like this. I make a lot of different pieces, a lot of different animals out of a piece like this. But when I used to travel with this, I traveled to Costa Rica a couple times with my set. And I'd go for a month, and I'd bring a bunch of blocks along. And I had it in my mind that, okay, this block looks like, this could be a monkey, this could be this, but they were just blocks because I wanted to kind of let the carving develop from the process and not have it cut already. And plus, it's such a small amount of wood to hog out. It's not like you're spending 4 hours making this smaller. You can make a basic shape out of this in 10-15 minutes, and then look at it and decide, well, what do I want to do with this? Do I want to make it kind of chunky? Should it be more elegant? You know, does it look like what I want it to look like? And so, yeah, so I do like working with this with chunks rather than really carving stuff out. Now, on the other hand, if I'm using a harder wood like basswood or boxwood, and I'm doing a larger piece with a lot of detail on it, like a dragon or like this moose, then yes, I will use a bandsaw and cut out the different under the legs and around the head and such. But with linden, it's not really useful. I don't think. I think it allows you a lot more creativity to start with a block. Next. anymore.
Hey, we have any other questions in the chat?
The only other one we had was if they could look at the moose one last time.
Yeah, I'll put my hand behind it here. So on this one, I did use a Dremel on the horns, just because there's so much in between there. And another thing I did when I was as I was planning it and making it, I made a wire version of the horns just so I could visualize it better. This I've done maybe 3 or 4 now. This was made in 2008 as well. But yeah, there's not a lot of pieces that I have to use a model for, because like I said, I like simple designs. But when I do need a model, either this is good, this potato wood, and I use that a couple times for different things. Wax. I've never used clay, although that's a good use. It's a good model making thing. It's pretty quick. And wire for the horn, for the antlers here. Those are very complex. It's a very complex design. So having a little help on that is nice.
Steve, curious, do you have you ever experimented with different ways of holding it, or do you always hold it in your fingers, even the tiny pieces, or is there any little tricks?
I've never. I'll do a little bit more carving here so you can see how I hold it and how I carve. I'll try to get it out of the way. So this is the rough out, and do a lot of cuts like this, pairing. I don't know if a lot of people do this. It took me a while to, phone battery's going. It took me a while to start doing this, but I reverse the knife. See how I'm cutting back and forth like this? Maybe all of you guys do this too, but I know when I first started doing that, I was like, oh, wow, I'm saving so much time. I don't have to turn around the carving. And then, of course, push cuts like that. You just have to, even the other day, I chopped off a little piece of my finger. But I don't cut myself very often. That was like the first time in about a year. It wasn't deep. It was just barely got to any blood, and it didn't hurt. But let's see what other kind of cuts. I plan on doing more videos of carving that I put on Instagram and on TikTok, even though I don't know about TikTok, but I put them up there because it's a video-based platform and it's supposed to be really popular now, but I don't know how many people go there to look at wood carving. But it's an interesting thing. They have interesting little filters that you can use too, like for stop motion and kind of fun stuff. But as you can see, you can really remove a lot of material. You can get down to where you want to go pretty quick. And as you can see, I am bumping up against this rubber finger, but there's not any cuts on it yet. And I would say a rubber finger like this lasts about a month, maybe more, depending on how much I'm carving. And they're only like 10 cents or something. The brand, let me get the thing in case people want to buy it. I don't get a cut of their thing. They're called Swing Line, and they come in boxes of 12. And I think they used to be less than $2. I'm not sure what they are now. And they come in different sizes. This is size 14. I think it's their biggest size. And the 14 is, it means that they are 28 millimeters in circumference. So if you measure your thumb and then divide by 2 in millimeters, I'm pretty sure that's how they do it. I've looked at this before, and at least for the 14s, my thumbs are 28 millimeters in circumference. And then they get smaller than that. But I like this. It fits good. I don't like gloves because my hands get sweaty, and that doesn't help when you're trying to hold on to something. And it does what it's supposed to do. It keeps me from getting micro cuts. Normally, if I could carve without it, but I do use a lot of paring cuts, and I use that to stop. And if you're carving a lot, you're going to end up getting a lot of little cuts that don't generate any blood, but eventually it's going to kill your nerves, and that's not good.
Coming up on about 10 after 4 in Eastern Standard Time, so a little over an hour. Do we have any other questions in the chat, Dave?
Nope, looks like we're through them. We got them all.
Okay.
Steve, we appreciate you coming out to join us today from Germany, and I know it's late there, so I appreciate you taking time away from your family to come on and meet with us, and definitely very interesting stuff. Not a whole lot of people that does miniatures, so it's really great to see how somebody goes and approaches carving something that small, and putting it into a scene and stuff is even better. So thanks for coming on, and make sure everybody go out and check out Steve's books. Again, he's got tiny whittling and scrap wood whittling, so make sure you check those out. Just want to remind you all about Woodcarving Academy. If you get a chance, go out and check out Woodcarving Academy. There's a couple of workshops that are available out there that's going to be coming up. Dave Stetson has a workshop, Carving Uncle Sam, that's going to be starting on May the 7th. And then Janet Cordell is going to be doing a workshop, Carving a Bighorn Sheep. That starts on May the 9th. So if you're interested in signing up for those, make sure you go out there and you contact Dave Stetson or Janet Cordell. Also, if you're interested in signing up with Woodcarving Academy, reach out to your Ron or check out their website. They have subscriptions 1 month, 3 months, and a year. And a lot of the classes that's been offered here recently are available out there on Woodcarving Academy. So make sure you check this out. We want to say thank you all for coming on. We appreciate you time out of your day to come on Saturday. Again, next week we'll have Joe Yu on. He's a CCA member. He's going to be coming on and talking to us about clay armatures. So make sure you join us next Saturday at 3 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And thank you all for joining the International Association of Woodcarvers. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me.